Well, we all get sick from time to time, and those illnesses are going to vary. Some are deadly, but some are just very easily treatable. Now, even given this basic fact that we have health advancements that can treat many ailments, we do not divvy them up in a way that everybody has access to them. In fact, we sort of ration them and only deem that those who have the means to pay for their high costs should deserve to receive them. I think Walter Cronkite himself said it best when he said that America's healthcare system is neither healthy, caring, nor a system at all. And while he's being largely hyperbolic, it's hard to say that he's incorrect when we just look at the basic reality of the healthcare system that we look down here in America. Healthcare specifically is center stage right now because so many people are upset about it and that they don't know whether they're going to be able to receive treatment for their cancer or just get a simple procedure done or just be able to have follow-up care for their newborn. Today I hope to persuade at least a few of you to support a single-payer system that would ultimately overhaul our privatized approach to healthcare in general. In this regard, I will not only talk about the moral case for this, which I think stands alone, but also just the practical, sensible case and what we have to benefit from implementing such a system. Now, when it comes to morality, my basic morality tells me that in a civilized society, if we're making healthcare advancements, that should generally benefit the entire populace and not just a few people or just rationed off. Essentially, if we can afford to do so, or if we can manage to organize society in a way where it provides those goods, then we should just go ahead and do so. Now, as a personal story, a few years ago I came down with appendicitis, and I didn't find that out until I went to the emergency room. Luckily, I had health care under a socialized medicine system known as Medicaid, and I went to the emergency room, got treated, and got out in a few days after recovering. Now, I can't really tell you empirically what would have happened if I did not have that health coverage, but what I can tell you is that I likely would have waited, and I don't know if I'd be standing here today because I would have likely hoped and prayed that it would just be some normal side pain that would go away out of mere fear that I would be indebted to the healthcare industry for the rest of my life. What ultimately doesn't make sense to me is that when it comes to guaranteeing rights of protection from things outside of our control, we do not apply this logic across the board. Essentially, when you have a fire in your house, we have a sort of social insurance program that if your house catches on fire or you're in danger, we will collectively pay for policemen or firemen to help you out. What troubles me is that this same logic is not applied to healthcare, which just as threatening could be some sort of illness that you weren't prepared for. So when we talk about where we are and where we're going, well, let's take a look at just the basic statistics. According to the Census Bureau, in 2007, 46 million people were uninsured. Now, of course, after Obamacare was implemented, that number was essentially half to 24 million. With the AHCA, the new bill that's being proposed right now, that number is set to increase to about 52 million people left uninsured or underinsured. And there is limited data out there, but as a result of this, a Harvard study in 2009 did find that 45,000 deaths annually could be attributed to just underinsurance or just being plain uninsured altogether. Now, certainly with the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare and the increased consumer protections, that number dropped significantly, but with the AHCA essentially wanting to reverse anything that was useful from Obamacare's regulations and increase in expenditure, that number is significantly going to go up. Now, if you ask me, that doesn't make any sense, because if we are to declare ourselves civilized and wanting to progress forward, ensuring less people to have health care just simply doesn't make sense. It seems more regressive than it is progressive to just guarantee allotments of basic needs to less people with new policy. So where do I want to go? Well, essentially, I'm advocating for a single-payer healthcare system, and it's a system that most Americans, according to Pew, support overwhelmingly and have supported for a long time. But essentially, it boils down to this. Healthcare was incidents of healthcare and unexpected occurrences were too expensive to pay out of pocket. So essentially we as a society sort of developed a sort of insurance program, kind of like with car insurance, where look, accidents happen, or sometimes they're not even our fault at all. But essentially, if you fall sick, I guarantee that I have your back under the insurance plan. Only with a social guarantee that if I fall ill, that you will have my back as well. Now, essentially, single payer is the exact same idea. Essentially, we are all paying into a system and sharing the risk. Should you fall ill, I'll take care of you, but if I fall ill, I want you to take care of me. And the government essentially would be that single payer that we pay into to negotiate prices on our behalf and guarantee that we're getting the best bang for our buck. Now, market's most devout followers might say, well, the end-all be-all, our platitude is essentially that the market is the best way to distribute goods and services, and it will always correct itself and somehow be this entity that will treat everyone with fairness. But even when we just talk about cost, the market has not been effective. Even with Obamacare, we had a market approach, and prices have been skyrocketing for healthcare even before then. When we talk about the OECD found that we pay about 25% to 100% more than any other developed country, in which those countries actually have single payer themselves. And specifically, this can be traced back to what I like to refer to as private bureaucracy. We're paying for multimillionaires for their salaries. Health execs and CEOs are actually the highest paid health execs and CEOs are the highest paid execs in the world. And we do this not to get in exchange for them healthcare, because they essentially have nothing to do with healthcare except for just defining who gets to have access to the health and care that we so desperately need. Additionally, the Congressional Budget Office found that 30% of those costs, of individual costs, go to just wasteful administrative work that we would not see, we don't see in other countries, and that we wouldn't need to see here should we just override the for-profit privatized system. So it stands to reason that some people might say, well, since we're paying more, aren't we getting more from it, or aren't we getting better quality? And it's largely true that there is a strong correlation between outcomes such as life expectancy and infant mortality rate. Those are heavily closely related, but yet the U.S., when compared by health expenditure per capita to those outcomes, the U.S. stands as a pretty amazing outlier. For example, the CIA found that Norway has 2.48 infant deaths per 1,000 live births. Japan has 2.08 per 1,000 live births. However, the U.S. is almost double that at 5.87 per 1,000 live births. Additionally, the OECD found that life expectancy was, in Norway, it's 81.8 years that you could be expected to live. In Japan, even better, 83.4. But in the US, it's depressingly at 78.8. This while Norway pays $6,935 per capita. Japan, the most, arguably the most successful healthcare system in the world, pays only $4,150 per capita, while the U.S. is paying almost more than, well, really more than double that at $9,451 per capita. So why you would want to pay more for something that you're getting less quality and less quantity of stands beyond reason. Now, I think that not only does the moral case stand alone here, I think it's pretty objective that the measurements are clear. Single payer is the way to go if we want to move forward with a healthcare system that provides the best guaranteed care for all people. And in order to achieve this, I essentially think that we need to stop treating it as a matter of commodity, but more so as a matter of right.
All right, Kimberly, what did you think?
I liked your speech overall. I like that you used hand gestures to emphasize words, but I did feel like in the beginning you did use this a lot. It was kind of distracting for me. I like that you had eye contact with everyone. Oh, I especially like that you personalized by personalizing it, you gave your own opinion on healthcare, and you even gave us your personal story. It just shows like you actually know what you're talking about. I like that. In the beginning, I like that you avoided talking down when you looked at your note card, but I could tell at the end that you didn't practice the end as much because you started saying a lot and that you were looking down more at your note cards.
Okay. Well, I like the shared experience at the beginning as kind of this idea that brings everybody together, and the quote from Walter Cronkite's kind of attention-grabbing also. I think your goal is very clearly stated at the beginning, and there's a pretty solid preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. In the body of the speech, though, it sounds like, especially when you get toward the end, it sounds like you didn't get to the second part of your argument when you were labeling it internally. I heard the clear reference to, the moral argument, and I know that you get to the other part of the argument, but it's not signposted very clearly in the body of the speech. So that was a minor problem, not a huge thing, but it was because I know you had it signaled in the introduction, or I should say in the preview of the material, but it wasn't indicated as clearly in the body of the speech. The moral argument is kind of explained. I like the analogy that you draw to fire and police services. The accuracy of that analogy, I think, is part of where there is going to be controversy on the subject. And I like the fact that you kind of refer to the notion that we have attempted to do and address these kinds of things with the Affordable Care Act, for instance, is a way of trying to ensure that people get wider coverage on these sorts of things. You get a little caught in the weeds talking about the drawbacks of the ACA and the new act, and I think that maybe you need to move past that and maybe spend a little bit less time on that and more time on some of the problems that both of these things have, a lack of coverage, or perhaps problems with, like you mentioned, potential debt if people don't have the insurance and they still need the services, and then there are consequences to them and that sort of thing. The data on comparisons of the healthcare systems, I think, it's very typical that we get the infant mortality and the life expectancy data on those. The link between that, the correlations are there. The link between that and the healthcare system, I think, is largely presumed, and I think that you need to have something that sells that a little bit more. When we talked about cause-effect reasoning, I think that there's one of those, this is a good example of that sort of thing where we see, well, we've got this correlation here, so that's got to be the healthcare system that's producing those outcomes. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I hear so many speeches about vegetarian lifestyles, and they all use the same examples that you're talking about, where in Japan, and I'm going, so is it the healthcare system, or is it the fact that they don't eat as much meat, that kind of thing? And so I'm just going, you need to make a slightly stronger argument on the impact of having more coverage as the healthcare benefit that goes on there. That's kind of a reservation that I'm sitting here with, because I know that this is a cause-effect claim that gets made all of the time. I thought that you did a good job with, I like the personal example that you had, like I mentioned. The data on the insurance coverage is pretty good. The notion that a single-payer system is supported by the country, I think you need a little bit more information on that. The first question that I have, well, if it's supported by the country, why do we have the system that we have, or why did we have the system that we are, that's been so controversial since the Affordable Care Act? I think that there's an argument that says everybody wants everybody to be covered. How they want them to be covered, that's the thing that's probably the thing that is where there's dispute about those kinds of things. And the economic one, I think that you've got a good argument here about how there is built-in waste because of the bureaucracy that you're dealing with there. But I think you also don't, you kind of dismiss the notion that there is an impact of the market on cost issues a little too quickly. So I think you've got that's an important part of the argument here, and I'm not sure that it gets as resolved as it needs to be. But as a good primer on what it is that we ought to be having when it comes to a single payer system, I thought that you did a nice job kind of getting to us the basics there. All right, thank you.